Genetic Transformation Intro. Jim yawned and glanced at the clock. It was almost 9 p.m. Overtime was all well and good, but he would like to get home once in a while. Across the sterile room, Dr. Ann Chamberlain was finishing the latest batch of samples. She looked over her shoulder just in time to see Jim yawn again. "Am I keeping you up, Jim?" she said, smiling. "Sorry, Anne. What exactly is that batch designed to do?" A small grin slipped across her face. "It's a secret. If it works, you'll be the first to know." Jim gave up. It was obvious she was not going to share her secret. Jim had a fair idea what it was. For months, Dr. Chamberlain had been working on a project to rewrite a person's DNA via a benign virus. The advantages were obvious. Any defect in a person's DNA could be repaired. At the extreme end, Dr. Chamberlain hoped that the process could extend life, or at least remove the worst excesses of age. To help her, Jim had been hired as an assistant 6 months ago. "You go on home, Jim. I'm almost finished here." "Thanks, doctor. See you tomorrow." Jim left the sterile area and went through decontam. Only when he had left the lab did Anne open up an airtight container. In the container was a small vial of blood. She opened the vial and added 1 drop of a colorless solution. She then sealed it and sent it upstairs for a chromosome analysis. She had already done one analysis on the blood, which had yielded a perfectly normal result for a human male. For the experiments, both Anne and Jim had supplied small amounts of blood, which saved the hassle of obtaining some through official channels. The result reached her desk the next day, just before lunch. It showed the chromosomes of a human female, an exact match for Anne's niece. Anne remembered the trouble she had to get through to get blood from her. Eventually, she persuaded her 17-year-old niece to show her how she drew samples of blood from patients. Julie, the niece, was thinking of a medical career. Anne leaned back in her chair and smiled. It would work. Not just the minor changes she had been working with till now. A full body change was possible. All she needed now was a test subject. She was under no illusion that she would be able to get one in an official program, but she had to test this now, and she had a test subject in mind. She realized there was no way a 25-year-old male would allow this to be done to him, but, she thought, since the change takes only a few minutes, I could test it on him and turn him back while he was unconscious. The only problem was how to knock him out. "But it's Saturday, Dr. Chamberlain," said Jim in a pained voice. "Yes, I'm sorry, Jim, but my experiment is at a critical point. I'll show you what I've been up to over the last few weeks. Just remember the overtime, Jim," thought to himself. "Okay, I'll be there in about half an hour." Jim walked through the deserted building up to the lab, put on the clean suit, and entered the sterile room. Where was Anne? She was always here when at work. As he looked around, he started feeling faint. He tried to make it back to the exit, but collapsed unconscious before he could get there. Anne had watched him enter on the security cameras and rushed up as soon as he entered the lab. She suited up and put a respirator on, then entered the lab. Anne reached under the main bench and switched off the cylinder of anesthetic, then switched the ventilators to full. She rolled Jim onto his side and pulled off his clean suit. Underneath, he was wearing his jeans and shirt. "The anesthetic should give me 10 minutes, she thought, as she rolled up his sleeve and injected one of the 2 clear vials into his arm. The DNA virus was spread around his body and immediately set to work rewriting his genetic makeup. In front of Anne's astounded eyes, Jem's features began to soften. His strong jaw, covered in stubble, became smooth and more feminine, and his nose became petite and cute. His hair turned blonde and grew longer. In seconds, his face was that of Anne's niece, but something else had grabbed Anne's attention. His shirt had grown tight as 2 magnificent breasts had quickly pushed their way out of his now hairless chest. The shirt could contain them no longer, and several buttons popped off to reveal 2 soft, white, round globes of flesh with prominent nipples. Anne looked down at Jem's jeans, which were much tighter around the hips, but looser in the crotch.
A quick feel confirmed that Jem was now a girl where it counted. Anne realized that her time was running out, and she would have to turn him back now. She pulled out the second vial and injected it into the petite, feminine arm, so unlike the hairy, muscular one he'd had a few minutes before. She waited a few minutes, but was shocked to realize he wasn't changing back. What had gone wrong? She thought frantically. Suddenly, the answers sprang into her mind. The first virus was resisting the second. It was a simple enough problem to work around, but it would take time, more time than she had. She heard a small, feminine groan. Jem was coming round. Now what was she going to do? Jem slowly woke up. Where was he? Why did he feel so groggy? He managed to crack open his eyes and look up. A blur in front of his face resolved into Dr. Anne Chamberlain, looking very worried. "Are you all right, Jem? Don't speak. There was a cracked valve on a bottle of anesthesia. I saw you go down as I got here. Are you in any pain?" Jem managed to shake his head feebly. He felt the rustle of something soft by his ears as he did so. Anne must have put a jumper or something under my head, he thought. He felt slightly alarmed when he noticed Anne still looked very worried. She noticed him looking and managed a nervous smile.
Anne looked down at the beautiful young girl looking up at her. How am I going to explain what I did to him? He would be absolutely furious. An idea sprang into her head. If it were an accident, then he wouldn't be mad at her. She could turn him back, and he wouldn't tell the authorities. She slipped one of the empty vials in her hand on the floor and knelt on it. Jim didn't seem to hear the small crack as the vial shattered. Jim, there is another problem." "Relax, it will be okay. It's the reason I asked you to come in today. I've made a major breakthrough in my DNA-altering virus. I had prepared several vials that should allow a full-body transformation." The realization of what she had discovered caused Jim to forget his weak state. This is what Anne had been working towards for years, but why was she telling him this now, while he was still barely conscious from the gas? Anne continued, "When you fell over, you hit the bench and smashed one of the vials." She held up half a broken vial for Jim to see. "And it totally transformed you. Don't worry, it's totally reversible." "I hope," she silently added. Jim was suddenly fully awake. "No wonder I feel so odd," he thought. "Who am I now? Well, I can't have transformed into myself, and the only other person Anne is close to is her boyfriend. I must be him. No wonder she's looking at me so oddly." Paul, her boyfriend, was the same age as Anne, 40, and was very handsome from what Jim could remember of the few times they had met. Anne swallowed. "Here comes the difficult bit," she thought. "The vial you fell on was based on the DNA of my 17-year-old niece. I'm sorry, Jim, you're now her twin." Jim's face was now one of absolute shock. His full feminine lips parted, and he whispered in a weak whisper, "No!" He immediately realized his voice was high-pitched and feminine, and with all his strength he lifted his hand to his chest and found something impossible there. Two big, soft, sensitive, impossible things! His hand slipped inside his open shirt, and he felt his large breast. His breast! It wasn't some fake. He could feel his hand on it as well. His nipple responded to the attention and sprang erect. When he was with his girlfriend, he loved to play with her tits, but now he had tits of his own. "I'm built better than my girlfriend now," he realized. Anne coughed, and Jim jumped and took his hand away from his breasts. "Your shirt couldn't handle your new equipment. Put this jumper of mine on until we get home." Jim, still feeling very woozy, focused on the jumper. It was bright pink. He'd never wear anything like that normally. But he didn't have much choice now. It was that or display his new breasts to the world. Anne quickly and efficiently undid the buttons that had popped off and removed the shirt. He deliberately avoided looking at his breasts, but he could feel them there, swaying and bobbing with the slightest movements. Anne helped him pull the snug jumper over his head. Anne then pulled his long hair out of the back of his jumper, and he realized he had a lot more on top than usual. Anne pulled the jumper down. It was a much snugger fit on Jim's large breasts than on her own body. The fabric was stretched, and if you looked, as all men would of course, you could clearly see Jim's nipples. Matters were not helped by Jim's breasts becoming aroused by the feel of the jumper on them. She just hoped they wouldn't run into security on the way out. I'd never be able to explain why I was dragging a half-conscious girl through the complex, she thought. She carefully lifted Jim to his feet and slowly eased him out of the lab and down the corridor. Jim was amazed by the ease with which she had lifted him. Then he remembered he was probably much lighter than before. He noticed that Anne seemed to be slightly taller than him, whereas before he was a good 6 inches smaller. They finally made it to a side exit where Anne helped him into a seat. "I'll go and bring the car around. I'll only be gone 5 minutes, okay?" Without waiting for an answer, Anne rushed out the door. Jim rested his head on the wall and closed his eyes, still very groggy from the anesthetic. This was just not happening. He must have had too much to drink last night, and this was some drunken nightmare. "Are you all right?" "Oh, shit! A security guard!" He opened his eyes and looked at the guard. He was over 50 and overweight. I'm waiting for my, aunt." Jim was again shocked by his high and feminine voice. The guard looked at Jim. "She's on drugs," he thought. "Who's your aunt, miss?" Jim was momentarily surprised at being called miss, but managed to blurt out, "Anne Chamberlain. She's taking me home. I was at a party last night." He managed to smile weakly at the guard. The guard didn't notice, having just realized Jim was not wearing a bra. Jim saw the guard mentally undressing him and felt very uncomfortable. How am I going to deal with this? Fortunately, Anne burst in through the doors at that moment and froze when she saw the guard. "Have you got the car, Auntie? I still feel very hungover." Anne gave Jim an odd look, but she quickly got the hint. "Well, that'll teach you for drinking too much. Come on, let's get you home." She helped Jim to his feet and moved him out the door. Jim was infinitely thankful that the guard just opened the door and didn't offer to support Jim. He was sure the guard would feel him up. Jim climbed into the passenger seat, feeling his breasts jostle in his jumper. His hips felt wider and his bottom larger and softer, but he absolutely refused to think about what lay between his thighs. Anne secured Jim's seatbelt, the strap coming between his magnificent breasts. It felt much more uncomfortable than wearing a seatbelt as a man. "You okay, Jim?" Anne said from the driving seat. "Yeah, I feel so tired." "Well, the change was very stressful on your body. It needs to rest." She put one hand on his knee. "I promise you I can reverse it. A day at most, and you'll be back to your normal self." The drive back was mostly a blur to Jim, but Anne was right. He felt totally exhausted. Anne pulled into her drive and into her garage. She looked over at Jim and saw he was dozing. Anne found it impossible to believe that this beautiful young woman was really a fairly muscular man. Anne went round to the other side of the car and helped Jim out. She took him upstairs to her bedroom. She carefully laid him on the bed. "Jim, you just rest here as long as you need. Give me a call when you wake up, okay?" Jim nodded drowsily, and Anne left quietly. Before sleep overcame him, Jim wondered what would happen if Anne couldn't change him back. To be stuck in a buxom woman's body for life? To have men lusting after his body? The idea struck him with fear and a strange excitement. Before he could worry about it further, he slipped into a deep sleep.